if we're operating the way that we're supposed to be operating as men, we don't have to worry about turning the tide. We have to worry about every single day being day one of being a good man. And how many day ones can you stack together?
And so I can be a firm man on certain things, but I can also give my life like Jesus did for the betterment and sanctification of others. And this is not weakness. Mm-hmm. And this is not the epitome of manhood.
Well, hey, welcome to Church with Chris. I am so glad to have a couple studs on with me today. Absolute studs. David Dillard and Quentin Craig. I'm so glad to have you guys. Honored to have you in my house. Thank you for making this work. But I want to welcome you to episode 11, I believe this is going to be. So we're working out what might be a two-part episode because these guys have a lot of wisdom to share. And they don't view it that way, but I view it that way. And hopefully I'll be learning a lot from them. I hope you will too. This conversation is going to be mostly directed at men. But if you have men in your life who you think would be served well by something like a podcast that's talking directly to men, that would be great. And it might be helpful for some ladies to listen to as well. But just a couple first off things. Other than thanking these guys, I do want to mention our sponsor, first and ever sponsor for today's video.
Our sponsor for today's video is Glory Portraits. If you're looking for a high quality, one-of-one portrait drawn by somebody who is incredibly talented as a keepsake for you, a gift for maybe a friend or a family member or a loved one, Glory Portraits is something you should check out. Whether it's a portrait of yourself, family, pets, or maybe celebrities, you'll be amazed at what my friend Destry Brown can create. Each portrait is 11 by 14 inches and comes in a 14 by 18 inch matted frame. Usually turnaround time ranges anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, and you can reach out to Glory Portraits on Facebook or just text Destry directly at 812-344-4867. Now, if you're feeling really generous, I would love for you to tap the like button on this video or podcast, subscribe to the channel, and we'll get back to our conversation.
I was trying to think about how to start the episode. And one of the things we need to understand about manhood is that whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we talk about it or not, we have some struggles that are very real and very personal. And Quentin and David are really going to dive into a lot of this. But some of the stats that I was kind of looking up were as of a bunch of 2021 data, because a lot of the 2024 data is not readily available by the CDC. Imagine that. Overall suicide rates are 14 people per 100,000 people for men and women. However, for men, it's about 22 out of every 100,000, which doesn't sound crazy big, but that's pretty big. What that actually means is that is 3.5 times the rate of suicide for women. Men account for approximately 70% of all alcohol-related deaths. Which raises the question, well, why do men drink so much alcohol, right? It's not just for a good time. It's also in bad times. Men are more likely to be both the perpetrator and victims of violence. Men made up about 79, so almost 80% of all homicide victims in the U.S. That's a lot. We do some stupid stuff, but we are also the victims of some stupid stuff. While women are more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and depression, men are more likely to underreport or suppress their symptoms due to societal expectations about masculinity, which contributes to a higher risk of suicide, higher rates of suicide, and other mental health crises. You believe those stats?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I was actually, I brought a very similar stat. It's like the suicide rate, I think is, it's super telling. And in my experience, right, like I don't have all the perfect answers, but if you talk about generally what are men expected to do, I had this discussion recently with my wife. She's like, I never really knew that, and this is going to sound funny, men were so emotional. And I was like, it's an interesting thing, right? Like, how can you maintain what society would call manhood while still being vulnerable, right? What's that balance? And if you're saying, take complaining out of it, right? You're just saying, this is how I feel. I feel good. I feel bad. I feel uncomfortable. I feel, anxious. how and when is it okay to say those things? And have we gotten to a place where men are actually comfortable doing that? And I truly don't think that we are necessarily there. And if it does happen, and you think back to like your high school days or your college days, and it's like, man, I'm having a hard time. It's like, okay, great. And like you get called names for it. And it's like you get picked on and ridiculed. And like maybe someone is actually having a hard time, right? And that was them extending that one moment where they're saying, okay, I'm going to float this out to my best guys, and I'm going to see how it's met, because I'm struggling so much that I need to say these words out loud. And it happens to be like with guys that are going to end up picking on you for it. And now you're done. The walls go up.
Yeah.
Who else are you going to turn to? Like, that was my best shot. It's like, I really am alone in all this. And how do you process that? Right. So like for me, like I've seen those stats, I've seen similar stats. I do believe those stats are true. I think it's one of the biggest challenges that our society here in the US, I don't know if it's across the world, the same kind of challenges with like being vulnerable, but like you can maintain masculinity, you can maintain power, you can maintain strength, you can maintain like a godly walk, you can maintain all of these things and start talking about it and be vocal about it. You don't like, I think stoicism may have its place, but that doesn't mean turning off what it means to be a human man. And being able to share that with each other and have these types of conversations and these types of moments. So, yeah.
David Dillard, ladies and gentlemen. So
it's heavy, man. It's heavy.
Yeah.
Because there's guys that are in it right now.
Quentin, what do you think when you read those kind of stats? And before I go forward, I probably should have acknowledged this is my brother-in-law. Quentin's my brother-in-law, and then David is his brother-in-law. So
Yeah.
we run in some family circles, and a lot of these conversations are extensions of things that we have talked about before. And I want to get your thoughts, just immediate thoughts on those stats, but then I'll probably jump to David, because David, oh, you're good. Yeah, David actually has an interesting. I'm going to dive into a little bit of what got you started in these conversations in just a little bit. But Quentin, right off the bat, though, when I read stats like that, what goes through your head? Like, what do you think about? Does it shock you?
It does not shock me. I think the word gets thrown around too much, but pandemic. I think there's a pandemic in men where we are afraid, or we have been taught over the last handful of decades to just, or however long, to swallow our feelings and
bury it. Yeah.
Bury it. You got the phrase "man up." I think it's a good phrase, but I think it basically is just a blanket statement for, get over it. Don't feel things. Don't express things. Don't tell your boys things, because your boys are for watching sports and playing games. But it's really, it's like, man, if you look back in time, men never walked alone. Like, it's only in the last, few hundred years. I don't know stats on that, but
fact check that.
Ask Jamie.
Jamie, is that
Jamie? Can you put that on the screen? Oh, wrong podcast. Sorry. But like, if you look back, everybody roamed together. The hunters and the gatherers, they went out together. They sat around the fire together. But nowadays, we go to work, we come home, we, hopefully are serving our wife and our children, if you're married and have children. But it's oftentimes men don't have communities around them to express these things. And if you don't have the men around you, and we'll get into it, but godly men around you, you are going to struggle, because you have no outlet. And if you do not have a relationship like that with other men, and then there's also an issue of men don't express their stuff to their wives. And that is your closest friend, who she's there to hear all of your burdens. And we've got to get back to a place where it's like, bro, if you are afraid to tell your wife what you're struggling with, you've got to fight through that uncomfortableness, because she's there for you. And so I agree. I mean, it's just the weight that this world puts on men. It is unbearable to do it alone.
Yeah. It is easier said than done, for sure.
For sure.
To get into, and we'll dive into a little later, the practical side of, what it means to be a man in your marriage and parenting and in the workplace and some other things. But it is a lot easier said than done to do that with your spouse, I think. Probably for men and women, but especially for men, there's things that if you let out of the closet, like, they will never think of you the same way. And you do have to figure out what can they bear and what can they not, what can they hold and what can they not. And, I'm sure they're having the same conversations in their heads with us. If I tell them this, if I admit this to them, they'll never look at me the same way. I might not be as beautiful to them. I might not, they might not want to be affectionate with me, or that, so I think we all think through those things differently. We all suppress those differently. And, I might get into it too, but yeah, I've had some really dark moments, even in the past 6 months, where it's like, man, if I tell my wife all the things I'm thinking, she'll never be able to look at me the same way. And I think when I read stats like this, I'm like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It really adds up. So
where are you supposed to go with it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, where do you go? And maybe it's not something that is a public conversation. Maybe it's a you and her conversation, and you have nowhere to go now, right?
Like, I think, because we live in a sinful and fallen world, that stuff is almost guaranteed for every single person. The problem is that we don't have tools to address it with. And by tools, I don't mean like pragmatic, like things. If you do this, it'll make your depression go away. But I think we have lost the ability to sit. I don't want this to sound wrong, but we have been taught that, or not taught, but so much of the world around us is like, when things get tough, the only way out is death. Is I have to take my life. But as men, because we have been taught by the world around us, our parents, our grandparents, whoever it might be, that because we can't communicate this stuff to other men or to our wives, that it is the only way. And we have lost the ability to sit in that pain. And again, I'm not trying to throw a blanket statement, but some of the darkest moments of my life have been some of the moments where I've learned most about who God is. And I don't mean that when I brought my troubles to him that he just made them go away. But it was in those moments where, right when I first became a believer, that I wanted to give up everything, because this life that I had formulated and I thought was giving me purpose and value, all of that value was taken away from it. And I saw it for the emptiness that it was. And I was like, I want to give up. But it was in the suicidal depression of the Lord showing me the emptiness of what I was putting value in, was where I learned about how much he loves me. And so when I read something like Psalm 42, where it says, like, these are the guys, the sons of Korah, who are leading worship for the Israelites. Fact check me on that. I think they are. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? This man is feeling like this hard reality inside of his soul and in his mind. The next line, hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. So he doesn't say that here's how I get out of this. He's feeling the weight of life. And then he just clings to the hope and to the memory that God is good. And that God being faithful and good will eventually alleviate this. And it's not a boom, you're going to feel better the next day or the next hour. But if in that pain, you can go to God and let him hug you and let him hold you and remind you that he will not let you down, you can get through it. And then when you add the layer of going to other men who love God and say, hey man, I'm struggling with this. Help me to remember the goodness of God. That weight gets so much lighter when you have other people in your life to help you go to battle. But it's when you sit at home alone and you've got to make these voices in your head quiet, where you turn to alcohol or you turn to the P word, or I don't think you can say it on YouTube. That's why I'm.
Yeah, I think they demonetize me.
Yeah, you got to say corn. Where that's why so many men turn to these things, is because we feel that emptiness. And it's like, well, if I can't express this, I got to make these voices quieter somehow. I got to numb the pain somehow. And so that's where like I want to help guys understand, like, you're going to feel the weight of life because people sin against you and you sin, and that has an immediate effect on how you feel, because it's causing a felt distance between you and God. If you're a Christian, it's gonna cause a felt division, not a reality. There's no division being caused between you and God. That's settled. But you're gonna feel distant from him. If you're an unbeliever, like, that's why we tell people, like, come to Jesus where there's hope and there's life. Because if you're an unbeliever struggling with this stuff and you don't want to turn to Jesus, I don't know what the answer is, because I don't think there is one. And that's why we see so many, like, the world out there, just unbelieving world, is just riddled with anxiety and struggle of every kind. We every day we see coming up with new ways to numb the pain, instead of addressing it head on. And like it's hard and it's difficult, but I mean, it's worth it. It's peace and it's life, and it's joy. And it may, like I said, it may not go away immediately, and it may be something you struggle with forever.
It's a fight.
But I promise you that fight is worth it. And at the end, it's really worth it when you hope in the one who gives life. But yeah, I mean, I think the volatilityness of the human mind and sin in this world and sin in our hearts cause depression and anxiety and worry. And sometimes it is as easy as having a conversation, and it can make those thoughts go away.
For me, what I actually realized it was at the end of it, what sort of I think started to bring me out of it was realizing how much I was worshiping me.
Mm.
And worship, we all worship, right? Yep. We worship something, we worship someone, we worship somehow. Mm-hmm. And I think there were ways that I realized how I was worshiping me instead of worshiping God, right? So you said you learned a lot about the love of God in that. For me, it was I learned a lot about me, and how selfish I am, and how much I wanted things to be going my way. I wanted, that kind of thing. So, and when they don't, because it's like, man, if everything was, if there were no problems at the moment, like, yeah, I probably would have been fine. If there were no relational issues, if there were no, no kind of inner turmoil conversations I was having that needed to come to light, it was like, yeah, it's probably fine. Mm-hmm.
There was I can't remember who said the quote. I think I might have heard it, like Jordan Peterson referencing someone. I can't remember, but it was something like, if the world had no wars and, everybody had enough food and enough, money, and they were doing whatever they want, people would start wars because it would be boring, and they would try to sort through it, kind of thing. And like they would invent like ways to get frustrated, essentially, is the concept. And I think about, when you're talking about working through the pain, like really defining that, what defining the pain, right? And is it what I think my life should be versus the path that I'm on versus the path that God wants for me. Like that's a three-pronged life, right? What I think, what God thinks, what's actually happening. And it's like, you get to choose. You're allowed to swim downstream. God is going to open doors and he's going to shut others. And it's like, if you get a shut door, man, I get so stoked when I get no's, you know. I went through a season very recently that you both know about where I was looking for like full-time like work at like organizations that I respected and things. I was getting out of freelance and I was like, I want to have healthcare kind of thing, right? And it's
a whole lot
like,
to ask for.
yeah, I want to be able to go to the dentist, but
Dentist.
I was getting so many no's.
Yeah.
And with each no, I was like, yes, this is outstanding. I am so thankful for this closed door because I know that that's not it. Next, keep praying about it, kind of thing. And so the concept of like defining the pain, it's like, am I frustrated that things aren't going my way? Am I combating God's plan for me? Am I walking with God? And the more I zoomed out on those types of that type of idea, I'm like, I can't remember if it's in Jeremiah or somewhere, but it says something along the lines of, if you're struggling, count it as a blessing because your faith is going to be stronger on the other side of this. And
I
so
think it's 1 Peter.
Is it?
Yeah.
So when these struggles come and when the waves rise, and there's a song about it, like praise you in this storm. It's like, this is fantastic. I am so excited to like that I have to spend $30,000 on my sewer, right? You know, that's a struggle. That's a bummer, but I'm going to get excited about it because that's a struggle that's being put in front of me. And the sewer thing is, I don't know, I guess that's not context for, there's other context that goes into that. But
Did you have to do that?
we actually didn't have to do that,
Oh.
right? So I know. So it was like
Praise
this
be.
struggle, the struggle that got presented, and ended up not having to do that, which was great. But the idea of like these hurdles get put in front of you, these walls go up, and it's like, you know, am I punching through this? Like, what am I supposed to do here? And there's going to be some kind of guidance if you're walking with God and asking him for direction. Like, he's going to allow you to find the path that he wants you on, and those doors start opening, and it might not be the door that you thought it was going to be.
Rarely is.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, guess what, dude? You're going in a totally different direction. What am I supposed to do with that? Well, you're supposed to walk through the door because that's the one that I opened for you, right?
I think is it Martin Luther who said, great quote, "I've learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages." Have you heard that?
So great.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. Learning to embrace the change, the challenge, the frustration, the difficulty, because it's going to lead you in a direction God has for you. Yeah.
It's easy because you get into these states where you're like, man, like I'm not where I want to be professionally. I'm not where I want to be socially. I'm not where I want to be with like personal relationships. Like all of these moments, right? And there's like practical ways to get out of those things, right? Obviously you want to put God first, but like there's actually like physical daily like checklists that you can make for yourself, right? How's your diet? Are you getting outside? You're complaining about socializing. When's the last time you sent a text and told someone you appreciated them? Like all of these like things. And at the end of that checklist, you can say, I'm super comfortable being depressed. And because I'm choosing not to proactively do the things that will get me out of this rut, right? And it's like, which boxes are you going to check? The ones that say, yes, I'm doing everything I possibly can. I'm putting God first. I'm getting outside. I'm like prioritizing like diet and health. I'm prioritizing relationships. I'm telling people that I love them. Or you're going to check the box at the bottom that says like, I'm super comfortable where I am. And I'm like, I don't mind being in this rut.
That's really good.
Right?
Because
Like, which
I
sounds
think
better.
because that is so practical to run through. Yeah. That list of like, what can I do to shift the way I'm thinking?
Yeah.
One of them is just sleep. One of them is just eating better. One of them's just, like really, really practical things. Like, are you drinking too much? Yeah. You're going to be a little altered, like not just for that moment, but probably for the days ahead. Your brain is not going to work the right way. Like things that you really, really simple things. Yeah. I like the checklist.
Highly
gift.
scientific statement. Drink more water.
Right. Yeah.
True. No, yeah, no, that's so
That's
easy.
what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
And even as
More
simple as
water,
like
less caffeine.
as simple as like biblical disciplines.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
you actually seeking God? Are you
Right.
actually in the scriptures
Yeah.
to have your mind renewed and transformed?
Mm.
Like, if the answer is no, it's like, well, yeah, start there.
Yeah.
That's, are you praying?
Yeah.
Are you experiencing and communing
Yeah.
with God?
That's like, so you get into like the worship, like you were talking about. We all worship something, someone, like whatever it is. And if you break down your day by hours spent doing whatever, right? 8 hours of sleep, hopefully. 8 hours of sleep is also a good one. You got to get sleep. But then you spend like 4 hours at night binging Netflix. How much time
or
did you
Instagram or
yeah,
TikTok
or whatever?
Yeah.
How much time did you spend in the Word that day?
Yeah.
How much time did you spend praying that day? I hear people talking about praying, and I'm not saying that I'm like super great at this, but I hear people talking about praying. And it's like, how often do you pray? At least once a day, maybe even like 2 or 3 times a day. I'm like, dude, I pray like every 15 minutes. I'm like, you know, asking for guidance on the conversation that I'm having with somebody. I'm like, oh God, give me the words for this, please. Or it's like, hey, like I didn't want to do what I just did. Please forgive me. Or like, hey, I'm like doing like I feel like I'm constantly doing, and I don't know if that's like the way that it's supposed to be done, because it seems like overly informal, maybe.
Paul said, pray
But-
without ceasing.
Well,
And
okay.
David took that real seriously.
Right.
I think we've all been trying to be better at praying since about 33 AD. So,
But the idea is like,
100%.
you want to operate in such a way where you have confidence that you're doing the right stuff.
Mm.
And if you can lay on your pillow at night and sign off on the day saying like, I truly made the right decisions, because we have that ability. We have a bunch of decisions. What is the average? I think it was like 30,000 decisions a day or something. There's a stat floating out there. There's a lot of decisions. What are you going to eat? What are you going to drink? Are you going to stand, sit? Where are you going to go? All of these things. But like, there's some meaningful, what are you going to do with this decisions that happen every single day? Are you going to choose to act in kindness? Are you going to choose to forgive even though you feel wronged? And that's a whole nother folder to open, I suppose. Are you going to choose to pursue God instead of binging the latest show? Like, all of those types of things add up. And if at the end of the day you're on your pillow and you're like, man, this was good. Like, you will change the way that you feel about yourself and the way that you view the world. And it's not going to be like, I'm in this rut. It's going to be like, I'm in this season, and I'm going to give my all in this season, and it might not be what I thought it was going to be, but guess what? I'm going, man. Let's go.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Man, I love y'all's wisdom, to be honest. Like, I feel like y'all have such, y'all could just go. I could just be like, hey guys, just talk,
we
just
get
go,
to
just
spend a lot
go.
of holidays together. So.
Yeah. It's a lot of learning together and growing together. So no, it's amazing. I definitely welcome to the intro to the episode. We're 40 minutes in. But time goes so fast, doesn't it? While you're just sitting here talking.
Holy smokes.
When I get to watch it, I'm like, oh man, that's crazy. So
Wow.
I do have some really, some things I want to jump into with just culture. So basically, David, before we get into that, you had really gone on this journey. I think culturally, you were kind of seeing, experiencing, listening to, learning from guys that we're talking a lot about manhood, right? And what it meant to be a man, a good man. Probably you've stopped following some of those. Probably you've picked up some more, right? Some more resources that you found along the way. You've even created some of your own. I think Solomon GPT, my man created. Have you done anything more with that? Explain what Solomon GPT is real quick. And then I want you to just briefly describe too, what took you on this journey, because what you really seem to care about now, and you told me about, I think we're at one of our daughter's birthday parties, and David was saying, I'm really into like how to be a man. And not that you're saying you're a perfect man, you have everything to share with people. More so, hey, how can we become better men? Yep. And that's such a relevant conversation. Yep. Probably should have started the episode this way, but y'all were spitting fire. When you have a burden, a lot of times that burden comes out of your some of your severe pain. Some of your greatest ministry can come from your deepest pain and the things that you feel like, man, I need to grow in this so much. Like you
Yeah.
take this deep dive into some kind of topic that you're passionate about. What was it? Why was it men for you? What was it that made you completely change, like your Twitter kind of things you were sort of talking about and into, and you're also kind of started, I think, like a spiritual journey,
Yeah.
right? And started taking faith really seriously in your relationship with God and sharing that with other people. So between those couple things and that long convoluted question,
I'm
what
trying to get an answer in my
took
head.
you?
And
Yeah,
Very
it's tough.
Pauline question.
I'm so bad at this, guys.
Run on sentences.
Right? There were no commas in that, no periods. What took you on that journey? Why did you decide to go that route? Because then culturally, we're going to get into what men are thought of and why you wanted to tackle that.
Yeah. I think for a long time, I was trying to figure out what my spiritual gifts were, or my spiritual gift, right? And I'm still not sure that I've super figured it out, but I think being an exhorter is one of them. And so, like, someone to encourage and someone to uplift and someone to, like, because I struggle to think of a more purpose-driven life than to use the gift that God's given to you with everything you got. I thought a lot about that, like professionally, what do I want to do when I grow up? And it's like,
You're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's well, the thing is, like, professionally, you can do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah.
That's not you. It's a part of you. But what's me, right? What did God put me here to do? And he's given us all gifts. And that's like such a cool thing, right? To be able to say, my gift is boom. And I struggled to think of like something that I could get more excited about. Like, what can you truly go all in on? Like, really, Pokemon cards. I love them right now. But it's like that idea. It's like, if you truly go all in on something like that, what's the output?
Yeah.
Is the output what God wants you to be doing? Right? Is it something that makes me feel good? Right? And then, like, how do I feel? Well, my feelings exit the equation, right? We're not promised an easy life. It's going to be brutal.
Right.
It's going to be tough. And when those tough things happen, it's like, good, do hard things, good, right? And so when I started getting into like seeing guys post on Twitter encouraging stuff, I was like, that's really interesting. And I started to like follow more, and I was like, I'm really digging how they are giving practical advice for like daily stuff. One of the guys said something like, write a nice letter to your daughter and go and read it to her. Like, that's a fun thing and she'll appreciate it, and like, whatever. They make you cards, you can make her one too. It's like, dude, that's great. I'm totally doing this, and I did. And she didn't care about it at all, right? But I did it, and I got to share a moment with her, and it made me feel something. Like, I was encouraged to go out and do something that I wouldn't normally do, net positive. How can I encourage other people to start doing that too? And I started gravitating towards this spiritual gift thing, where it's like, what puzzle piece am I in this entire scheme, right? And how can I make the most impact? And I had been in social media stuff for a while, like, past few years, and got really excited about starting to pivot into helping men be better men. And like you said, it's like, I screw up every single day, multiple times a day. Like, I'm not saying this is something that I have locked up, but there are things that we can do collectively to grow together, right? And I bet that dude that prompted everybody that he tweeted at to, like, write letters, he screws up multiple times a day too, kind of thing, right? But he got however many guys, at least one, to do something net positive, and it was a cool idea, right? And maybe someone out here watching this is going to do that because it's a cool idea, right? And that's one of thousands of examples of things. And so how can you start perpetuating that and be a voice? And one of the reasons that I wanted to get like really into it is because I feel like there's a void right now with voices for men, like speaker for the men. Like, who would that be, right? And there's a lot of, I think, social media guys out there that are navigating it the wrong way and like filling the air with the man up stuff and like disparaging women, and it's like it only counts like what's your body count, how big is your bank account, and like all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, man, you're defining it the wrong way,
Yeah.
dude. Like
Yeah.
that's not it, and if you start going all in on that stuff, you're going to be empty, and it's not living for God. You're not living for God. And like, what else would you want to be doing? Right? Where does that path go?
Well, I mean,
that's so encouraging just to hear you just dive into the spiritual gift thing, actually, because the Bible even speaks to you as in Romans. Don't wish that you had this gift or that gift.
Yeah.
Like don't
one
what the
body part
ear
cannot
say to
another.
another.
Yeah.
I wish I was this, or I wish I was that gift, or whatever. So yeah, no, that's actually encouraging because it's hard to figure out. That's not easy.
I don't know if I have yet either.
Right.
I don't know if I have. I used to want to be a preacher. I was like, when I was a kid, people were like, oh, Dave, you're going to be such a good preacher someday. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I was a kid. And then in college, it was so wild. In college, we were all out at Denny's, big table. And this lady walks up to me and puts her hand on my shoulder. And she says, you're going to lead people someday. Let me pray for you. And I was like, what is happening? And it's like those kinds of moments and instances. And I'm like, is this stuff real? Is God guiding me towards being a preacher? And it's like, nothing's ever come of it. But I also don't know that I've ever felt as activated for God as I have over the past 6 months, even
right.
like year, maybe 6 months. It's like when I started to feel activated, where I wanted to proactively dive deeper in my relationship with God, and not just say like, oh, I'm checking, my God box today. It's like, how can I learn more and be better? Because there's one thing that we're aiming at, and so just trying to target, being closer to God.
There's something powerful about finding the thing and just saying yes to God.
Yeah.
We just need to get you some good Reformed theology, because that beard, you're in line for a good preacher.
That's the prerequisite.
Yeah.
Gotta have a beard.
That beard is killer.
Yeah, I'm out.
yeah, your patchy little thing.
I'm out.
I mean, it's what one of the old confessions of faith. What is the chief end of man? Is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's our purpose. And so that doesn't negate all the other things we got to do in everyday life. But going back to the garden before the fall, God gave Adam and Eve a mandate to rule and subdue and exercise dominion over the earth. That's before the fall. So they were literally made to, we don't fully know because of sin entering the equation, but, to work and to cultivate the earth in perfect unison, being united to God. We've obviously lost that because sin has entered the equation and what it fully means. But like that part of working and using our hands and using our minds and using our bodies to do something is good. It's we now, because of sin and then being, reborn in Christ, have to figure out what does that look like in everyday life. Is how do I mow the yard to the glory of God? How do I work out my body to the glory of God? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list doesn't end. And I think, I don't know when we start on this yet, but like so many of the voices online currently, I think a lot of them say a lot of really good things. They just stop short. And as I was saying earlier, they come at it from different perspectives. And this might instigate some more conversation, but a lot of them boil down to at the end of the day to try harder. That's how you're going to fulfill yourself. And I keep saying the word Haley told me not to say it. I just did it again.
I floated the idea of having our wives on the next podcast to discuss what we are discussing.
They're literal
That's
sisters.
probably not a good idea.
Well, I guess Morgan is another sister.
I also just don't want to be told y'all are trash over and over and over. So
they
no,
wouldn't do that.
go-
They wouldn't.
No,
do
they
that.
wouldn't.
we'll get Haley on at some point.
They're
We'll see
actually
how
the
many
best.
times she says
We work remotely together at home,
and you know how
and
many
I'll be
times
like,
she's-
baby, stop saying
Stop.
I gave Morgan feedback on a meeting she was having once. I haven't done it since.
Never
Haven't done-
did. Knowing
That's
my sister,
amazing.
that makes
That's
sense.
amazing.
Well, she did the same. It was funny because like when we I think like first started, we could hear how each other like navigated
Yeah.
meetings, and it's like, oh, like you should talk about this, or you should say it that way, and it was like, okay, like that's nice for each other, and then like we kind of drifted away from that. I
Please
think
stop giving me
wisely
advice.
so. Yeah.
What's the time when you hear him on any phone call and you're like, that voice is different than
What's that
Right.
voice
than
you're
your- what's
using
that
there?
voice? Yeah,
What's that
yeah, what
voice?
is-
You don't talk to me like that.
That was real sweet. Yeah.
But anyways, back to it. Like, I think so many of the guys online, whether it's Peterson or Huberman or the list goes on, they offer, impractical, like how to take care of your body, how to operate, maybe more decisively in life. I think a lot of guys struggle with decisiveness. It's like, I don't want to, the risk of, I don't want to offend somebody, or I don't want to do that. So they kind of just get a little wishy-washy. And I think we need more decisiveness in our life. Like, do the dang thing. Like, stop worrying about every, ripple from this and act. But if you get to the end of the day and you've done all of these things to fulfill yourself, but you are still struggling with anxiety or whatever,
Mhm.
when that head hits the pillow and you can't fall asleep, all of the day's things are going to start funneling back through.
Mhm.
And if you haven't lived in a sense that you're not finding satisfaction and enjoyment and fulfillment in these things, but you know that these things are part of life, but your satisfaction comes from Jesus
Mhm.
and your relationship to him, then these things become, okay, this is how I bring glory to God by operating in these things. It's not what satisfies Quentin and brings glory to me.
Mhm.
It's I now am properly in this path, living how God has called me to live. Not at the end of the day, like, oh man, I really did good today. But it's like, oh, Lord, thank you for giving me the opportunity just to do these things today. And then you can go to sleep.
Yes.
Now, that is not an answer to sleep paralysis or you not being able to fall asleep. But
He is not a doctor.
I am not a doctor. But that's where like I hear a lot of these guys and I'm like, man, that's a good piece of advice, but you're missing the key.
So just incomplete advice.
It is incomplete advice.
Yeah.
And the problem with incomplete advice is like incomplete directions. Is like this morning we could have given you come to this town. You would have not known where to end up from there because you've been told to go this certain direction, but then you get there and you're like, now what do I do? Like, I went on the right path, but I'm still lost.
Yeah.
And so you need the full directions. You need the full instructions. You need the actual purpose of why we live and why we're doing these things.
So what do you guys think are the value, though, of those kinds of voices? Quentin said the only thing he wanted to do was call out Andrew Tate on this
Bro.
podcast.
You can fly me to whatever country you're hiding in, and I will come talk to you because you need Jesus.
No, so I mean, you mentioned a bunch of popular
Leave
guys.
that in.
Yeah, I'll leave it in. Yeah, no, if he sees that, that's great. It's great for me. Not for you. Not as much for you.
I think it's great for
that's
me.
going to end badly for you.
Well, I die sharing the gospel.
Okay. Yeah. the cultural influences are a huge piece of, you know, the conversation, right? How many millions and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of views do these guys get on like their advice and their, which is good advice a lot of times, right? But then there's people who don't have such good advice. I think all of that contributes to a cultural conversation that we have to navigate as men, that women also hear, and not just hear, but experience, right? They experience the blowback of
Yeah.
what are you becoming
Yeah.
as a man? What am I becoming? What are you becoming? What are the men of, well, let's just talk about the States. I'm not talking about the world because it's just so culturally different. But in our society, in the United States, what are you becoming? What are men in general becoming? All of that contributes, right? You realize like, oh, there's a reason Jordan Peterson's channel has 3 million subscribers. There's a reason that even, you know, some Christian pastors are so popular because they, you know, or so many men gravitate towards them. You know, when I was in college, it was like Mark Driscoll and the Acts 29 movement. And he was like brutish and just like really aggressive with language and attracted a lot of guys because he was saying, hey, we need to do better.
Mm-hmm.
We have to step it up. And he was using the Bible to try to do a lot of that. A lot of that was inappropriate. A lot of things, you know, I think he took too far, but there was like this obvious thirst and desire from men to receive that. And if it wasn't from, you know, I would say unbiblical sources, it was going to be from biblical sources who were talking about what am I supposed to be? Who am I supposed to become, right? For the people around me. What do you guys think? I would love to get your thoughts on, and maybe Dave, you could speak to this. How do you decide what voices are good voices in culture and what are not good voices? So like somebody could be saying some good things, but that doesn't mean you're going to point somebody to them as a resource. Like what is the what's the make or break, like deal breaker there for you?
I don't know if there's like a deal breaker for specific moments in time. Like I think like bad dudes could probably say some decent things, and I think good dudes could probably screw up.
Oh yeah,
you know. And so it's
That's
like
so good.
Yep.
So the lens that I really like to use is, well, it's funny, like I was reading, or I do a lot of listening to the Bible, right? Like I do it on audio, and I guess I want to say that out loud too, because I'm not super attracted to like reading a ton of things, and so like listening is okay. If you're trying to consume the Bible, consume it, whether you're listening to it or like reading it, whatever you're doing. But I listened to Proverbs. I think it took like, I listened to it on YouTube. It got me like, I don't know, an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. And I finished and I was like, if someone didn't have a dad, this is a pretty cool like road map for how to be a good man. That's pretty decent.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons, and you asked about the Solomon GPT. It's one of the reasons I made it based on Proverbs exclusively. So if you go to ChatGPT from OpenAI and you type in Solomon GPT, it'll say, you know, he'll pop up, and it's the bot that I made that basically like you can ask any question. My roommate's not paying rent. How should I handle this? Right. And it'll give
oddly specific.
Yeah, I know. Right. No, come on, Morgan. Yeah. No,
not his roommate.
So, and it'll respond, right? It'll give a couple paragraphs on response. It'll have 2 lines, 2 verses that it references, and then some like words of encouragement or something like that. But the idea is like, it's a lens, right? And I think the Bible is the lens, and you can start filtering the wheat from the chaff super quickly if you use the Bible to look through and say, is this like actually it? Because we're all on different paths. We're going to be fed different things, and we're going to take it different ways, right? If you go into, you know, church and have 100 people walk out, they're all going to maybe take away something different. Like so whenever you are ingesting this stuff, I think the filter, or not necessarily like separate the good voices from the bad, but like the filter to listen to all of it through is how is God using this to apply to me for what he's got me on? Because it might be different for what he's got someone else on.
That's awesome.
So that's the lens.
But it takes the lens, creating the lens, cultivating that takes work, you know, and it's difficult, and it's time consuming, and learning.
Well,
you're building the lens based on your scriptural understanding, right? So even those voices are really important. What voices are you listening to help you understand the Bible, or to even, because sometimes I'll read things. I'm like, man, I don't know what this means. So I'm going to go find somebody who I think does know what it means, right? And explains it really well. That person you have to consider, like, okay, how trustworthy are they? They're helping me build my framework for how to interpret the world.
Yeah.
And that could be a really tough thing.
I think that's a really tough thing. I don't know if I've even got that figured out, but it's like when,
It's probably constant.
well,
We're building that our whole life,
yeah,
right?
constantly, right? But the idea that you have to go digging for it, right? Golden nuggets aren't on the top of the ground. You have to dig deep and keep going through the mud and the dirt to get to the good stuff. And so it's like, how do you identify, I guess, how deep to dig, or like where to dig, right? And what voices to listen to, like you're saying. And for me, like if I'm reading through and I don't understand something or I want something expanded, like I'll often I'll go online, like look stuff up. If I have a concept in my mind, I'll go to like AI and I'll be like, like where in the Bible does it talk about this? And it's like verse, verse, verse. And it's like, okay, like I can start like deepening what I think based on like biblical passages, right? And so I think there is for me, using technology to like do that has been super helpful, because I haven't read like a ton of books on like supplementing the Bible, right? It's like here's so and so's perspective on what this chapter means. Here's another like great theologian's perspective on what that means. It's like I haven't dug into that stuff yet, and so what I'm using is basically like just tech to try to get a deeper understanding of what he's got for us, right? And some of it seems like it's pretty self-explanatory, and then you hear a verse or you hear a preacher like just open up an entire umbrella on one verse, and it's like I wasn't even like, and then the historical context and all of these other variables, and it's like that's super exciting. Also, how the heck do you know that? Because I wouldn't have even thought of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I was talking to Quentin the other day, and he was sharing. He was preparing. He's doing
My Sunday school.
his Sunday school. Yeah, it's like here's the notes on how I'm preparing. And I was like, dude, like I got to talk to you about this because one of the preachers I was listening to, like pulled something out of left field, and I'm like, how do you even know that exists to bring into this conversation? I was like, that's a beautiful thing, and for me, that is a lifelong endeavor. I don't know if that will ever be an automated thing for anyone, but it's like always in that constant pursuit. And so I guess what I would have to say for those out there that are similar to me, trying to deepen that relationship with God and understand the context and things, it's like, keep going, right? Yeah. Just keep moving in it. Keep going through God's word. If there's something that you don't understand, look up a few resources and try to figure it out. Talk to people who have experience in digging through those things and ministering on it, and you're moving in the right direction. And that gets to the idea of like doing more than nothing to pursue this, right? You have to do more than zero. If you're just sitting there and you're not consuming anything, like you are doing zero, and you got to do more than that to get to the next level. So
thoughts on that?
What?
That's a lot.
It is.
I'm talking too much.
But my
Sorry.
thoughts
No, you're
aren't
not.
related to like manhood.
Oh,
It's
then
more or less theological learning. But
yeah,
go ahead.
just that you need to continue to.
You do. You have to keep learning because our minds forget things.
To David's point, the simple things and the very low hanging fruit of Scripture, I think, can be understood.
Oh yeah,
and practically lived out in a very helpful way.
Yeah.
So like when you pull in the 45-minute sermon on the one verse that you just thought all this stuff's out of left field, like where did this come from? You you didn't necessarily need all that stuff to change your life. You kind of just needed that what you did understand from that one verse, right? I think we try to overcomplicate life sometimes. And it's like, no, the simple things in the Bible, if you just like, they're understandable and they're reachable and they're attainable. And, God even says like, this isn't too hard for you to live out. Right. So sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, it's like, you think, I don't know how much you want me to just like veer off here, but how do we apply, massive concepts that we learn about in the Bible? How do you apply the doctrine of the Trinity to loving your wife? How do you do that? Well, once you unfold the mystery that it is and learn that this eternal love between this being who is one in essence, three in persons, this perfect love between the Father, Son, and the Spirit, he now loves us in that, and he has adopted us into that. And now you can love your wife, and you now have a full understanding of how Jesus loves his church, and how your marriage is a sample of Jesus loving the church, and
Mm.
how you can live sacrificially
Mhm.
and give yourself for your wife willingly, lovingly, joyfully. Um, but sometimes we read theology, and I'm guilty of this, and we learn a concept and we're like, that's crazy, that's awesome, that blows my mind. What does that mean? Um, and no theological truth about God, or no theological truth about God is absent of an application. Everything he tells us about himself unfolds itself in it teaches us how to live, because we know that he doesn't change and he's good. Well, that means that, like, I can wake up each day knowing he loves me, and knowing that, when I wake up, he loves me this much, and when I go to bed, he loves me the exact same amount, however much I struggled that day, or however great I did that day.
Mhm.
Like, that's how we take these massive truths, um, and boil them down to, like, okay, back to, like, man, how to be a man. It's like, oh, that drastically affects my life. If he calls me to love my children and my wife and my coworkers, um, like, I can willingly give myself, not being afraid of, what the world thinks of this, or, you know, if I speak firmly to this person, and uphold the world's view of how a man should speak to his people that work for him, but I speak in babble to a child, like, in this loving, tender, joyful, playful, those are not opposed to each other. They're contained within the same man. And we're called to show authority. We're also called to be tender and gentle and caring to those who need it. And they're not opposed to each other. And so I can be a firm man on certain things, but I can also give my life like Jesus did for the betterment and sanctification of others. And this is not weakness,
Mhm.
and this is not the epitome of manhood.
Mhm.
So
That's great.
I'm not sure how I got from there to what I just said, but
Well, what's interesting though is like when I hear guys like you talk about your pursuits of manhood, your pursuits of God, your pursuits of understanding how to navigate the world, which is, really what this channel is about at Church with Chris. It's like how is the body of Christ supposed to navigate the world, right? We have the Bible. Sometimes it takes fleshing out, and it takes conversations, and it takes like and I have people on here who I trust and who I look to, who have either impacted me or who I'm trying to be more like. And man, what is God doing in your life, and how is he working through you? The problem with that is when you think about society as a whole, they're not looking at that. People
who?
anybody,
Okay.
most people, generally
Yeah.
speaking, are not looking at this. So you can take the general blanket statements of, just I think what the attitude towards men right now is, depending on what threads you're on, depending on what types of people you listen to, is just F the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Men are evil. Men are bad. Men cause all the bad things in the world. Men are the only ones that are bad. And for this reason, this reason, this reason, there's plenty of reasons we can point to. But that seems to be just this overarching narrative right now. Men don't want women to have anything. Men don't want to sacrifice anything. They are selfish. They ruin relationships and societies and all these other things. This is what I'm hearing. Maybe you guys are hearing different things. Maybe you follow different things. But just culturally speaking, how are we supposed to navigate that? It's just so crazy to see and hear you guys talk the way you're talking. And it's frustrating for me to hear those other bigger kind of overarching narratives and voices when it's like, yeah, people have been hurt by men. And yeah, there are a lot of reasons that we suck at a lot of different things. But it hurts my heart when I hear that, because I'm like, man, I'm trying so hard. And it just feels like that's not acknowledged at all. Now, maybe it is by your spouse or, the people closest to you, but just like in general, how do we turn the tide of how people think about men and manhood and masculinity? What is masculinity supposed to be?
I don't think we're meant to turn the tide. And I think that it's
turn the tide or fix the perception of?
No.
Okay.
I don't think we are.
What
and
do you
it's like
mean?
We're well, let me explain. Like we're called to be godly men, right? We know that that will be rejected by the world, right? We're told that in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also told that it's going to be a pretty tough go. And guess what? It's true. It is, right? And the fact that God's word prepares us for that and doesn't prepare us for like an alien attack from peanut butter sandwiches, right? Means that it's something that we will experience and that he knows we will experience. And he is giving us a ton of ammunition to combat those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, I am with you. Be strong. Here's strength, right? For a reason. It's not because things are going to be so easy. It's not because we're going to be attacked by peanut butter sandwiches. He doesn't give any guidance for that, right? He knows what we need. And so if we're operating the way that we're supposed to be operating as men, we don't have to worry about turning the tide. We have to worry about every single day being day one of being a good man. And how many day ones can you stack together, right? Yes, like dudes have done some bad things. They are currently, they will continue to, right? We can start like as humans aiming at almost anything we want to point blame. And if it feels like the wave is pointing the blame at men right now, great. I don't know what the next wave is going to be, right? But we're charged not to change the perception, but to operate in such a way where perception could be altered by how we conduct ourselves, right? But we're not going out there saying like men are good, men are the best. Like that's just not true to begin with, and we're also not called to do that, right? We're called to be godly men, and where does in the Bible it says like let them know you by your works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the warm blanket that we can rest under, right? How many day ones can you stack together of being a good man so that you can put together a life that you can say like I truly believe that I operated in the right way, and I like, you know, Bible based, like aiming towards like godly pursuits instead of focusing on the things of this world. And it might be easy to get lost in it. It will be, right? Because that's all we have is what we can see, right, in this world. So it's like, yeah, there's going to be distractions. We are fed stuff that we don't want to get fed all the time. And no one ever said it was going to be easy. So it's kind of like, it's kind of exciting to be, to know that there's so much more than the challenges that we might be facing or the script that someone might be reading about us.
What do you think, Chris?
I like the day one idea.
Mm-hmm.
All you can really do, all you can really control is what you do, and wake up and pursue God that day. And, you know, I think the thing I'm afraid of is what you see culturally when people give up that pursuit because it doesn't feel like it's making a difference. And that's probably just the Christian life in general to describe just the Christian life. I mean, I know obviously everybody listening is not a Christian, or doesn't care about the Bible or anything like that. And that's fine. I disagree with it, right, as a lifestyle, but I get it. And it can just be really, if you feed into the, because you on one hand, you can be a woman and you can say, I'm going to buy this narrative. And yeah, you're right. And I'm going to join in those voices. And this is what I'm supposed to believe. This is what I believe because it's what I'm being told to believe. As a man, you can also buy into that and say, Yeah, well, I'm trying really hard, and I just give up because nothing I do changes anything.
You're gonna get that. You're
You are
gonna
gonna get
have
that.
it. You're gonna feel it deep, and
Yeah.
it's gonna suck. And you're gonna be like, man, like I can't do anything, can I?
Hmm.
The reality is you can, right? Like how you feel about that stuff doesn't matter. Feelings don't matter. How we operate, like objectively, how we can demonstrate like our aptitude for developing strong relationships with each other, strong relationships in the community, being a contributor, being kind, being generous, like demonstrate the things, right? And if you're feeling something like, I feel tired, I'm not going to get up today. Well, no, like you're not allowed to not get up today. You feel away and you're going to let your feelings influence how you operate. It's like that's a no fly zone. Like that's where discipline enters the equation now, right? Like I'm going to be disciplined enough to know that I'm going to go through this struggle and it's going to suck and I'm going to like feel the burn, you know, whatever that burn might be, and I'm going to keep moving because I know on the other side of this that's where I'm supposed to be. And so like the feelings hurt, man. They hurt.
They hurt, and they seem to can, for me personally, and maybe you guys feel this way, they can override my immediate relationships, like the impact. I will severely undervalue the impact that my life has on the people around me. So like if I listen to an overarching narrative of like you're a piece of crap because you're a man and
Yeah.
that's it, because even though you don't know anything about me or how I treat anybody around me, um, it can just create a cynicism, I think, in me. So I think I like your point about like it is going to happen. Like it doesn't matter how much you try to impact the world, you are going to get kind of crapped on sometimes in some ways. But you can only do so much. I didn't really answer your question because I don't have a good answer for how to, I don't know how to like turn the tide on that. And when I say turn the tide, I don't mean,
You're not
oh,
walking
now
down the
women are
street.
bad.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that. I'm saying,
Yeah.
or trying to be better than women. I'm just saying turn the tide on how society talks about and thinks about men
Yeah.
Yeah.
being strong, being good leaders, being capable. Every TV show you watch from 1990 to now has a man as a freaking
Who's stupid.
oaf and like
Yeah.
idiot,
Yeah.
and a wife who just either
Knows what
can't
she's
stand
doing.
them,
Yeah.
makes fun of them, handles the entire house. Like now, if that's a caricature of real life and like reality, that's fine. That's not our reality. I don't
Yeah.
think that's y'all's realities either. But it can just feel like a really swimming against the stream, some like swimming upstream sometimes to try to change that perception. Do you feel that?
I think passivity for men is a problem, and I think that leads to pushover men that get taken advantage of, and by that I mean that if you're passive, you're not going to stand up for what is right. Therefore you kind of take a back seat, and those caricatures in those TV shows become true because that's what a lot of people have seen. Um, regards of turning the tide, if I, as a man, as a married man who has a child, am called each day to lead my family, to love my family, and uh, guide my family. If I go just full bore into that, um, that is my responsibility. If that and other men doing the exact same thing is what God uses to, let's say, reform society, so be it. Great. I think that can happen. I also think, as society in general, always is going through pendulum swings of what they think. You can go back to the 60s and 70s where, it was, this very like loose, laissez-faire type hippie sex of society. Then you swing to the 80s and 90s where you've got like, this patriarchy idea like really like kind of started to be fresh again. And what I mean by that is, you had just a lot of like male leaders in everything. And now it's kind of swinging back the other way of just more broad ideas. And so it's not, this probably rub people, some, not you guys, but it's not my issue or my problem to honestly take care of society. What I'm called to do every day is to lead my family for the glory of God, serving Him, loving Him. If that is, like I said a minute ago, what He uses to change the society around me, awesome. And impact my neighbors and coworkers. And if I am, at work, if I work hard and I respect and honor my coworkers, and that changes their life, awesome. If I, interact with somebody at the gas station and I'm kind to them and that changes their life, awesome. But it is not in my hands as something like I control, like I should not like lose sleep over, like how can I reshape society? But I'm called to be a principled man who wakes up with every day and exercises integrity and respect and honor. But I'm also called to lead in certain ways. And if that is what God uses to like, and I'm not even talking like, hail the patriarchy. Like I'm not saying that. But if someone who despises male leadership interacts with me and sees a hopefully good form of male leadership, and if that like changes their mind, awesome. Yeah. But I'm not setting out to be like, I want you to love male leaders. Like,
right. I think you guys are preaching the same thing.
Yeah,
which is great. Yeah, like a consistent, like, what can I do? What can I control? Who can I influence? In my pursuit of God and honoring Him and serving the people around me. Because I think some people have much more influence than others.
Yeah,
and those
sure.
are typically the louder voices, right? Whether they're positive or negative. Dave, I was kind of looking up.
I also don't feel called to be a politician.
Sure.
So if I did, my answer would probably be a little bit different.
Well, it's like that's a specific burden.
Yeah.
And
if I wanted to run for city council, I'd probably answer different. And all power to them if they want to, influence society in that way. I don't feel burdened to run for any kind of office. And so
you were getting at this point of like, it's not my burden. And I like that. I feel like it's so important for dudes to know that, right? Like it is not like, I want men to feel encouraged to be good men. And you're like, if you're charged to solve the world's problems, go solve them. If you're charged to lead your home, lead it, right? Like we're all charged to do different things. And so as we're navigating and we're hearing like, if we are getting any kind of sense of like cynicism or anything like that, because like, this is what society thinks of me. And it's like, okay, well, let's compare that with your objective reality.
Yeah.
Are you a dick? Yes? Okay, great. Like go, maybe they got it right for you, Are you not? Well, great. They got it wrong for you. Okay. Like don't sweat that stuff. People are going to see you from the outside. They're going to see you in one instance, maybe, and think you're made of gold or think you're made of not gold. Right. Like, and guess what? Guess how much that matters? It doesn't, right? Like you are charged to do the best that you can be doing every single day, and whatever someone else's perception of you shouldn't influence your self-worth of yourself. Like you're operating for one person, right? Or for one God, right? And that's the filter, man. Sorry, I just spit on you.
No, you're good. No, I appreciate that. I was looking up one of the guys that you were chatting with on Twitter back and forth, which I'll go ahead and mention this now too. If you want to follow Dave Moore, what is it? Dave Aims Up on Twitter.
Dave Aims Up.
Anything else you got?
Aim Up.
Aim Up.
That's the one that I'm trying to
most active
build for this stuff.
Yeah. I'm not on Twitter. Don't follow me on anything.
I was going to say, Quentin did just get Instagram, and he's spending a whole lot of time on it.
I've seen Chris too many reels.
Memes from Quentin. No, but I think it's one of the guys that you were talking to. You reached out to a couple guys that mentioned some questions, potential topics. One of them, and Quentin, you mentioned one of these ideas. They had just asked and suggested, where do men need to be more bold? And I would love for both of you guys to answer this, because if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to handle me and mine, what does that mean for how
Mhm.
bold you need to be,
Yeah.
and how far you need to reach, and the extent of your influence, right? I think it's a really practical question, but probably a million different applications from it.
Yeah. I, if I was, working with a young guy and like asking him questions, if he asked me this question, I'd be like, well, what areas do you struggle in?
Hmm.
Like, because, you might be bold in the workplace, but a pushover everywhere else, or a pushover at work, and then you take it out at home or at the gym or whatever, being bold in other ways. So I mean, you know, unfortunately, I don't think I can directly answer that question um, without knowing the person individually. Of like, where do you struggle? Because I mean, I've met with some guys, young guys in college that are, you know, they need help with relationships with their girls or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, here are some ways that you need to be bold and set up some boundaries. Um, or struggling with drugs, it's like, well, here are some, like, don't go, be bold and say no to those friends.
Hmm.
You might even need to not be friends with them if being friends with them is destroying your life. um, but some people won't enter that uncomfortableness and be like, well, they're my friends, like I can't not be friends with them, then I wouldn't have any friends.
Hmm.
um, Sometimes you got to count the costs, and it's like, well, do you want to progress in life, or do you want to regress as you get older? Like, it's so, I mean, I think it just applies in different ways how you should be more bold. If you know you let your wife make all the calls on everything. um Not trying to be controversial here, but
Fascist.
stop.
Pig.
Stop. Lead her, lovingly, but lead her.
We're going to get into that
Yeah,
in part 2.
that's fine. But
How to love
yeah,
her, how to lead
I
her.
think that's a pretty open question that I would honestly want to know. Hey man, like, how do you struggle?
I really like that.
Yeah.
I like the distinction on, like, boldness is going to look a little different.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on who you are, what you're into, are you in a relationship, not in a relationship? Do you have a job? Do you not have a job? All the things. What about you? Where do men need to be more bold? And this was from,
Yeah.
just to name him, give a shout out. It was from your guy, the Good Man,
Oh,
Brendan
on
yeah.
Twitter.
maybe we should ask him.
Wait,
Yeah. I tagged him. I was like, surely the good man has something to say about being a good
Hold on.
man.
I actually have his number. I'm gonna.
He's
No, I'm
great.
just
Hey
kidding.
man,
He's great. I
Dude,
actually
we're
do have
live
his
right
number.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's a
So
good
yeah,
dude.
that's _the_good_man.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of underscores.
A lot of underscores, but
Yeah. I think like it's tough to prescribe, right? I think painting with a broad brush. I don't typically like to do that, but humility. Can you be bold in humility? And I think that's a struggle, like, for each individual man within himself, since there is such a push for strength and a push for being able to solve it all and being the person with the answers. Being bold enough to say the words "I don't know" is something I think men could benefit from, like the humility that it takes. And it's not like, don't confuse humility with weakness, right? We're called to be humble.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that's an opportunity for men to be a bit introspective on how are they actually exercising humility, and if they're not, identify ways to start doing that.
so boldness is super broad. This is going to be really broad too, but also the idea of what is masculinity? What is masculinity supposed to look like in a man? So if you guys want to riff on that, I'm sure you both have different ideas. And that was actually, I think, a suggested question by another one of your guys on Twitter. And I don't have a great answer for it. I didn't look up a definition for it because I actually didn't want that to taint the conversation. I'm not going to read a definition out loud. But when you think about a masculine man, like, what are we, is that a good thing? Are we supposed to try to do that? Like, what should masculinity look like for guys?
I was talking to my auntie Eileen. Hi, auntie,
Shout
if you're
out.
watching. Yes, uh, years ago, and she was talking about my uncle Ricky, who I deeply respect. I deeply respect both of them. They have taught me so much, and she said, I'm confident in uh, Ricky's leadership because I know that God is leading him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was so powerful, and it really stuck with me. And I think that is the first bullet point in defining masculinity: be led by God. Uh, the like generic things come to mind, right? Be kind, be gracious. Lions don't need to roar, kind of thing. You know, you can be powerful and strong, but not be overly assertive or dominant. Um, you know, shake hands and look someone in the eye when you're doing it, kind of thing, like that kind of stuff. And so, like, I guess attributes of what a good or masculine man would be for me, like, kind of falls into those types of that type of definition, I suppose. All under the umbrella of like being led by God, because you can do all of those things and be doing those things for the wrong reasons, or be doing those things to sway influence, or what have you. And it's like, operate respectfully, be kind, keep your word, like choose to do the right thing, even when people aren't watching. There's always someone watching, right? So those are the types of things that come to mind when defining masculinity. It doesn't even, I mean, I don't even know if that's like overly masculine stuff. Those are just good rules, I guess, principles for humans in general, right? But yeah.
What do you think? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo most of that, or all of it. I think I think there are specific things where we see baked into the fabric of creation, distinctions between male and female, distinctions between masculinity and femininity. I do think, again, not to be a controversialist,
I was gonna say you already got canceled.
I honestly, seeking back to society, I couldn't care less. Masculinity, I think, has connotations of leadership, of authority, regardless of whether that has been harmed or not by poor leaders and poor men who have had authority. I think it is still baked into God's creation, and it is a good thing. We read in Ephesians 3 where how Paul calls men to lead their households. None of it contains, with an oppressive thumb, or harshness, or violence, or aggression, or any of those things. There are times in history and in daily life when men need to express aggression and a firm hand. It's almost never, or always never, towards their family, because discipline of your children is not some violent act. It is correcting them, it is disciplining them, it is showing them the way of life. I'm not going to get into spanking and any of that stuff, because that's a conscience thing that some people are fine with, some are not. But I think masculinity has all of those things of kindness and gentleness and humility and integrity. But I think it does also contain with it leadership and authority. Yeah,
That's a good answer.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, because if you have leadership and authority without all of those other things, you're a demon. like
I think it's an important thing to kind of flesh out, because when, the irony of this conversation is none of us have little boys. None of us have sons.
Yeah.
I have 3 girls, you have 1 girl, you've got 1 girl. It's like, how are we supposed to, it's interesting even to me, Dave, that you have this burden to help train good men, make men good men, and you don't have one, right? It's like because it's one thing for somebody to say this is how you parent a son, but it is another thing to think through the lens of who would I want my daughter to marry,
Yeah.
right? And that's almost even like arguably more important, right? To like, who would I want my daughter to be given to? You know, who would I want to be leading my daughter? So I think it's when men have the wrong idea about masculinity, obviously it can lead down roads of them acting in ways that they shouldn't act, right? Mistreating women, mistreating children, being domineering, just in all aspects of life. It's almost like a lifestyle. And I do see some of that in culture right now of the bigger voices. You know, I would say some of like the Andrew Tate type of voices where it's like you're going to learn some good things and some right things, but you're going to learn some really damaging things too. And like, you know, I've known people like that, right? I've known fathers who I see handle their kids in a way I think is really messed up. And it's, you know, some of those times you're like, man, if you would do that in public, what would you do in private? You know, that kind of stuff. And so even just like mistreating your wife or even being emotionally abusive because you think you have to lead everything, right? Whether it's for your kids or the people you work, you know, who work for you, or you had mentioned the workplace, like, man, there are a million avenues for you to be domineering, overly aggressive and ambitious. And so I think reining that in takes work, but it also, you know, on the same hand, you're trying to figure out, well, what does my wife want me to be?
Right. Yeah.
I do need to be a certain type of person that she would desire. And what is that supposed to be? So I think I would love to get into some of that stuff in part 2. And so we'll actually, if you guys are cool with it, we'll go ahead and wrap up episode 1. I think y'all are just crushing it. There's so much to talk about. Thank you so much for joining us. Any last thoughts on what you guys had, what we were just talking about, before we kind of wrap up this overarching theme of manhood?
I don't want to lose a thought, but I don't have a son, but I have a daughter who needs to know what a man is. Because she is going to grow up and she is going to be told a million different things by the world of where her worth comes from and what a potentially a false view of a man is. And so I want Hattie to know how men are supposed to act, because I hold her future in my hands. I can destroy her life, or I can send her on a path of like, hey, this is how you learned leadership from a man, or love from a man. And at any point when the world says, you know, this is how you should be treated by a man, and it doesn't align with what I have showed you by my actions, come talk to me. Like, let's just have a conversation. So when some guy, when she's 16, 15, 16 years old, is like, hey, you know, oh, don't worry what your parents think. Like, let's be physical. No, come talk to dad. I will remind you of like, hey, this is how men lead. This is how God calls this interaction between male and female to take place. Like, I don't want her confused about anything that the culture says about how a girl, where her worth comes from, or what gives her, you know, purpose in life. I don't want any confusion. So that's where I feel. I don't have a son yet. If Haley and I have a son someday, my approach will be like, hey, this is still how a man is, but it'll be totally different, because it's just a different avenue. It's a different type of raising of a child. A father and a little girl, as you guys know, is this like deeply like tender, like moldable thing, which a son is as well. But a little girl is like you are giving her and showing her worth. And if you devalue that, or you think you teach her at a young age that she has to, any of these certain things is how she is worth more. Like that's what I want her to know. And that's why, like, you know, we got to get this manhood thing right, so our children understand what a man is.
That's really good.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I guess my last word would just be for the guys out there. Like, my heart really goes out to guys that are struggling with like loneliness or depression, or trying to just figure out what's next. that stuff is heavy.
Mhm.
It's heavy, man. And you lose sleep. Losing sleep puts you in a spiral. You don't want to eat the right stuff. You want to be comforted. You don't want to interact with people because you might have self-worth challenges. Like, it is tough, man. I was there. I've been through it. And like, I think a lot of dudes have. But I guess I just want to like say the words out loud. Like, you're not alone. There are men that are going through this. Good men are going through this stuff. Keep moving. Pray about it. If you know somebody that's like going through a divorce right now, or know someone that's out traveling, like, we're entering the holiday season. We just had one yesterday. Like, not all the chairs at the table were full, kind of idea, right? And so reach out to those guys. Yesterday, I challenged you guys to text two of them, right? And I said, hey, like, message two guys, let them know that you are thankful for them and that you love them. I did that, and I got 2 responses. And I also got 2 independent messages coming into me just saying, hey, like, thinking of you, or whatever it was, just from cool. 2 other random guys, And it's like, we're not alone in any of this. Yeah. And if you're going through it right now, like, it's a drag, and it will get better. We have to just keep moving. Put God first. Like, get your mind straight with him. Be social. Get out there. I was talking to one of my buddies, and like, he was like one of my good friends, and I was like really going through a tough time, and I was trying not to drink during this tough time because I was not treating alcohol the right way. And he's like, oh, we're all going out, man. You want to come out with us? And I was like, no. Like, I can't drink, And he's like, tell you what, you come out and just have like club sodas, but come out and be with us. And I was like, yes. And I did. And I'll never forget that, because like he like sacrificed a drinking buddy for like a true friend moment. And that's like a big deal in that type of like culture where we're all going out drinking, but it's like, well, no, like, I'm going to make sure that Dave is taken care of. And I was having a tough time, and like, that sticks with me because I needed it. And so be that guy for someone, or like, try to identify ways that you can get into a position that you're going to be, moving up and aiming up. And so you're not alone, dude.
Yeah, that's so good. And I do like the emphasis you guys keep putting on. You do have to seek after God's heart in all of this. Like, the hardest thing, I think, especially for men who don't want to submit to any authority, is to submit to the ultimate authority. And there is a way that submitting to Jesus Christ changes the way that you think, the way that you walk, the way that you act, the way that you feel in certain situations in your life. It changes the way you treat everyone around you, or at least it should, right? And so I do want that to be felt. I do want that to be very clear. Like, you can be a decent man without being a Christian. You can be a decent man and be all kinds of other religions. I do think personally, when you seek the Bible, when you truly seek after God and what he has for your life, what plans he would have for you, how he would have you live and submit, that submission looks a little bit different for everybody. Saying yes, like we talked about earlier, finding something, an avenue that you have in life, like a little sphere of influence that God's given you, wholeheartedly saying yes to that. I'm going to go where you want me to go. I'm going to say what you want me to say. God can bear, a lot of fruit through you. And so we do have to ask ourselves, are we bearing fruit? If you're not, if you find yourself in a place where you don't feel like you're bearing fruit in the world, maybe you need to start on your knees. Maybe you need to open up the Bible. You need to figure out, what is God's plan for me that I have not considered? Or is a relationship with God where I need to start? Is that something I need to pursue? And sometimes it even looks like just opening up your Bible and trying to figure out, how do I do life better? Because Dave said the Bible teaches you a lot about manhood and how to operate and, how to live in the world. Maybe that's what it takes, is how do I make my life better? And sometimes that starts in the Bible. And a lot of times what you're going to find is that leads to an experience with Jesus that you will never be the same from. And so I think that's what's happened with us. I think that's what's happened with a lot of people that we know. And that's something that I really deeply desire for you, whether you're a guy or a girl, you know, a man or woman. I think that's where it has to start. I think it's going to change your life. So join us for part 2 when we dive into a couple specific things regarding manhood, like relationships with spouses and significant others, and then also parenting, and then whatever else might come out. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you join us on the next episode.
Do it.
Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things so that you get notifications when the next episode comes out. But I think that's going to do it for episode 11. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.